Thanks, everybody. It's great to see an audience and know everybody's name. It's wonderful. I have a few cue cards, but I want people to ask questions anywhere along the line, so it can be a bit of a conversation. It's not necessary to wait till the end. Or did you want to ask something? Just
you're gonna have to speak up a lot,
okay.
I think. Am I right?
Or stand up.
Who doesn't hear me? Way back? Okay. I'll try my best.
Can you stand up?
Stand up.
Stand up.
I'll try to speak. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay. Just starting off, I'll tell you a funny story because most people here know I was a journalist. And my dear wife, Kate, she was a great reader. And sometimes she'd read things that I wrote, right? And I can remember on one occasion she was reading one of my articles. She kind of rattled the paper and she looked over on the side at me and said, "You can really write. How come you can't talk?" Anyway, she did all the talking. I'll start off with the inspiration for the book. Okay, it came pretty simply from the Wayfarers, which has been around a long, long time. So this was one of the first books I probably got after Ray Apley, who's my Baba contact, gave me the Everything and the Nothing to carry around for a few years, right? Anyway, I'm just going to read it because it tweaked my interest when I read the Dust Jacket first. The Wayfarers. William Donkin was born of a distinguished family in Wimbledon, England in 1911. He was educated at prep school in Kent, Rugby School and St. Bartholomew's Hospital, London, qualified as a doctor from Bart's in 1939 with various degrees. His youthful love of adventure proved to be great preparation for his part in the master's search for masts. At the age of 20, he crossed the Sahara Desert in the hottest months, May to September, covering 1,400 miles by camel and the last 300 on horseback. As a member of the Alpine Club in London, he went mountain climbing in the Alps, Norway, High Atlas, and Corsica. He was a medical student when he first met Meher Baba in London in 1933. But as soon as he qualified as a doctor in 1939, he joined Baba in India, and he served as a medical officer in the army from 1941 to 1946. Well, that was enough for me to get really interested in Donkin, but and that interest sort of carried on after I'd heard about Baba in 1967 here in Myrtle Beach. And Kate and I made a couple of trips to England, and I think that probably helped as well. One in 1978, and Delia was nice enough to have us over for tea and muster some Baba people together, even though it was not a regular meeting. So I do remember bringing William up to Delia when I was there. But the clincher was 1995 when I went on my first trip to India, and I talked to Mani. I wanted to talk to one of the Mandali about William, and the opportunity came up when there was a strike, and Bill Cliff and Bobby Bernstein, I think I saw Bobby come in, and myself, we all jumped in a rickshaw because the bus was being blocked by the strikers at Meherbad, and we went to Meherbad ahead of the bus, and I got to talk to Bonnie privately, just one-on-one, and I mentioned, I said, I think William Donkin would be a great story, and she did exactly to me what Baba did to William. She knew I was a journalist, and she said, he'd be a great story. Why don't you do it? So I was a goner, at that point. But I was committed, as they said. Anyway. So when I went to journalism school, probably in 1968, I started, a year after finding out about Baba. I always wanted to write Baba books, but writing all day in the bogus news field, as Baba would say, it was not something. When I came home from work, I preferred to go running, play tennis, go sailing, chop wood, anything that was not taxing my already overworked brain from the day at the newspapers. So, scratching the surface. Dear Kate was a museum curator, so I had lots of tips about research and other things and how to handle documents carefully. And we would often talk about William Donkin over a glass of wine or a bottle of wine even. And we would talk about, she was in addition to museum work, she was a potter. So we both had sort of creative pastimes. Mine was pursuing the Donkin project, and hers was, when she wasn't at the museum and fighting with her board of directors, was throwing pots, right? The initial research started off mildly, and I contacted the Alpine Club in London just through letters, and they were very British and very helpful. But they wrote back, and the Alpine Club put out a journal on mountain climbing members, and the Donkin family were predominant ancestors. They were all William's adventurous spirit. It came honestly from his forefathers. I did mention in the book about a relative of his father's who was lost with two guides climbing the mountain. And in the Alpine Club, there's a photograph of their last bivouac site. And it's just a little ledge on the side of a sheer cliff. And they left the next day, and they were never seen again. And they found their camera equipment in that bivouac site a year later. But they never found any bodies. So. Anyway, the Alpine Club, these early letters and correspondence helped a lot with just keeping the interest alive. I started off very early also communicating with Don Stevens, and Don was very supportive of the idea. I never met Don, but we did have letters going back. This was the old days of letters, right? Not emails. So they were going back and forth between France and Nova Scotia. And he thought, like Monty, he said the same thing, that William would be a wonderful story, and he shared his own remembrances of William with me. So that was really appreciated. At that point, I still did not have a family connection. I knew there were nieces and nephews, and William's twin sister Mary lived until about 2001. So she was a lot longer than William. Anybody have any questions?
When did William die?
1969, August. Shortly, 5 months after Bob. So there's all kinds of theories. Broken heart. I think I did mention in the book his letter to Fred Winterfield saying, I felt the letter when I came across it in the trust office when I did some research in the trust archives, that William was not happy about becoming a spokesperson for Baba, but he felt this was coming down the road because he lived it, right? And he didn't. He complained in that letter to Fred saying, I suppose they're going to ask us to do this now. And I think at the point where he died, he was already teed up for Myrtle Beach. I think that was, I hope it didn't do him in, the thought of it. Anyway, all through, as I said, I worked at 6 different papers for 35 years, newspapers in Ontario and Atlantic Canada, weekly papers and daily papers. And when retirement came around in 2005, I had a lot of information on William. And all of a sudden, I had no excuses, right? I had to get going because, I was 60 at that point. So The way I started the book, and some people have heard this story, and it's kind of the formula that I'm using now on a new project. The framework for the Slave of Love started with a timeline search of William's name through Lord Mayhere, right? And that's great to have all the volumes are online. So I just plugged William in, and I came up with 100 pages of timeline on William and what he was doing over those 30 years that he was with Baba. So that was very helpful. And William's diaries, of course, were the next source, probably the most important source. And I used them extensively from covering 1939 to 45. And then I was a lost rabbit when 1945 came, because they ended. And I was beating the bushes in India and tormenting David Fenster and other people. There's got to be more diaries. There has to be more diaries on Wayne. Where are they? But there were no more diaries. So. The other important source was the Wayfarers, of course. And I think it was my second reading of the Wayfarers. I read it when I first came to Baba. And it was, I found, just by reading it over and using it for research purposes, I felt William worked so hard on that book, and it was said that, William blew a couple fuses probably writing that book. And I could see how he would, because he worked very hard, and there's correspondence between him and Adi Sr., looking for photographs and agonizing over. We all know William was very meticulous, and he wanted things to be done right, and he had to have this picture and everything. And he was stymied and couldn't get what he wanted. But the finished product of the Wayfarers, it boggles my mind the work that was involved in the book. Other sources of information on William were from the Mir Baba Journal and the Awakener. He did a number of articles in both of those publications. So depending on where I was in my writing, if I thought the subject matter that he had in a particular article fit what I was writing about, then I would pull it into the narrative, right? So that was the way. The anguish, I don't know how early I came up with the Slave of Love title. It was probably a bit of a working title for a while, and I felt I got torn up a little bit about it, because I said, did William really feel like he was a slave to Baba? I didn't want him to feel that I was. If he didn't feel like a slave, he felt honored, I'm sure. So that tormented me for a while until I heard Erich's story, and other people have heard this story, but I'll repeat it because it made me feel better. I think when I was in India in '95, Erich, I must have recalled the story, or somebody else told me that some Westerner had questioned Erich about their role with Baba, the Mandalese role with Baba, and they said, the Westerner had said, you're just a bunch of servants for Baba. That's all you are. You're running around at his beck and call. And, we all know how Erich downplayed things. Well, I think his pregnant pause, which he's noted for, he waited probably a minute before he answered it. And he said, servants. We weren't servants. We were bloody slaves. And he said that with a twinkle in his eye and just broke the room right up. And when I recall that story, I said, it will be Slave of Love. And Baba calling for the board in his last moments of his days of his life about befitting a fortunate slave. It all fell together. So, and I felt like a slave myself sometimes. And we all do, I'm sure. Anybody want to pipe in? Just feel free. I'll just talk about the props of the writer's life for a bit, because sometimes I think procrastination's rather than props. We're always looking for the perfect environment so we can not be bothered. And anyway, I wrote the book by hand, the first draft of the manuscript, using legal pads and Papermate Eversharp. I keep buying them when I come down here because they're in the grocery store. The little yellow pens, I have them in here. So I was so tired of teletype machines ringing in my ear at the newspaper and white noise and the fluorescent lights that I needed quiet to write the book. So it was all handwritten the first time. And after a little while trying to do that at home, I also needed a writing shed. So that had to be built. 6 by 10, well insulated, heated with a boat stove, 300 or 400 feet from the house, so I couldn't see the house. Because you're sitting in the house, and even if you're working on something, there's always, as Kate used to say, there's always a do me list, right? Mm-hmm. That's just surrounding you. So I got away from the do me's and 6 by 10 desk, chair, and boat stove, and the pieces of firewood. Ray would like that. They were about that big. Everything was miniature, but it kept. And I wrote in there in the winter with snow, and I had four. Some people have seen windows of it, 4 windows. But when I sat down, I couldn't see out. So everyone that came by said, "Well, you can't see out." And if I stood up, the deer would be looking right in the window. I said, "I don't want to see out. I want to see in." You know, so that was my reason for not doing that. Anyway, I invested in a high quality laptop. My kids are always advising me now, and my son is a Mac fan, so a MacBook Pro. And I started inputting. I would eventually start inputting the mountain of white Lego pages piled up into the laptop, and I edited as I went along. I started, and that cleaned it up a little bit. So probably my biggest prop, as in prop me up, I will say was my dear wife Kate, because she was. If I'd come up from the writing shed, I used to write pretty well every morning for 3 or 4 hours. And she always said when I come in the house, how did it go? How many pages? If I said 2 or 3, it was a good morning if I did 2 or 3 pages. So that was the process.
What music did you play?
A lot of classical. I don't know my music that well, but I know what I like. Baroque, that kind of music I like. But I didn't have music in the writing shed. That was afterwards. There was no power, so it was a daytime. No power to the shed. So. And thankfully I have a son-in-law who's a builder, because I got everything done myself: insulated floor, insulated walls, windows in. I found the windows along the side of the road and just built the shed around it because they were free, right? Uh-huh. So the joists and everything, the studs were all off. And then I got to the roof. What are those roof? Rafters, right? I said to my son-in-law Mark, who's a builder, I said, that's going to take me at least 6 weeks to do. I think 6 of those, right? He said, no, it's going to take us about 6 hours. So he pitched in, and we got that done. So there was lots of help along the way. The main writing on the book, as I said, took place after I retired. So that would have been 2005. And it took a long time, even that. 2012 before we hit the streets, as they said. Spring, Kate and I made our last trip to the center together, and April of and she was not feeling well when she went back. She was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, so which turned out to be something else. That was so she adjusted her diet, and that was. when I came back from the center in 2008, I can remember I had put something on. I'm just threading these things in because they turned out to be very important. I put something on genealogy.com. How many people use genealogy.com? Yeah, I was looking for relatives of Williams because I didn't want to finish this book without the family. Right? I wanted the family to be in on the book, and I put just a basic few sentences looking for relatives of William Donkin, twin sister Mary, 2 older brothers, John and Brian. Please contact such and such. So the way Baba provides, right? Fresh home from the center, and it was a hit on my on the internet. I didn't bring my laptop with me, and I'd sat there for 2 years, and it was from Bridget Berry, William's twin sister's youngest daughter, who's coming for the opening of the watercolor show. They live in Missouri. So she said, "I am who you seek. What do you want to know?" She just made the project come alive again, being plugged into the family. It was wonderful.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
About the watercolor, since you just brought it up. Will she be bringing the originals? Does she have the
No,
originals?
I don't think Bridget has any originals. They were all sent. Digital images were sent from the nephews in England. They have the originals. And there was one, Baba's Jopki, which is at the end there. That Mimi Hay brought that back from India just recently. Because the original of that hung in Bob Sweet's office for many years. So,
If time and space were unlimited, could you go another 400 pages?
I'm really looking for that lost manuscript that Sheila Kalchuri-Fenster talks about. And I've mentioned to David, her husband David, I said, if you find that, call me. I'll be over in a day.
Yeah.
So they know that, but it may have gotten thrown out because there was rumors that William's stuff was rifled through after his death. And if the cameras went missing, he had 2 or 3 cameras. And if somebody had come across the manuscript, they might have tossed it thinking it wasn't valuable. But it supposedly was finished with photos that William had taken of Baba and other pictures that no one had ever seen, and was only Baba and William that knew what was in it. But I think it was spiritual truths and other things, and I hope we find it. We may still find it someday. Maybe not in my lifetime.
Do you know how many? Just to come back to that, how many? How many watercolors he did do?
I don't know, Cheryl, how many he did. We have a 13 for the show in March. I would think he probably did double that anyway. So I think they're around, and the family may not have sent me anything. I never really questioned them because 12 or 13 is pretty well what the meeting place will take for a show, and they're quite good. And I have a couple early ones by William, and you can see how he progressed, and they're all done during the war years, so he would have had short leaves and went off and did watercolors. When he had a longer leaf, he'd try to find Baba, right? And he was often stationed close to Baba.
So he studied art?
He did not. He did not study art. I could not find it, but his mother said in the childhood notes about William, he's a good artist at an early age, and he did win some classroom award. So there was, and she went to the Slade School of Art. Like William's mother was left of left, I think, and his father was very conservative. So it was quite a family. I mean, she was a Jean Rousseau, and the household must have been. It was not ordinary.
Bob, do you know the reaction of the family members to Baba?
Bridget is looking forward to her stay for 3 days at the center, and she can't wait to walk the paths that her uncle walked. They're all, I think we're going to see, there's another niece in Connecticut. There's 2 nieces in the U.S. The rest, William's twin sister had 6 children, including 2 twins, right? And Jane, who lives in Connecticut, she's I think she's a twin. There were 6 in Mary's family, and the middle brother, John, had 3 children. So,
Do you know their response to Bob?
no, because what happened, they would have all been teenagers in the 60s, right? They're all pretty well all in their 60s. And when William came home, he did not talk about India. It turned to family talk, because it had been a sensitive topic with his father, who kept wondering when William was going to come home. And he pushed William to come home. And Baba, I think, said, next year, tell him next year. So I'm sure there were, when William did go home on his trips, when he would go as a front runner for Baba for anything in the West, he would often go to London. And I'm sure there might have been some arguments when he was younger with his father. And probably not his mother. She sounded very, very liberal. I think that they thought he was wasting his life, but they were not. There was almost a vagueness about what he was doing. They thought he was working in a hospital for some organization, spiritual organization, but I don't think they were aware of the Baba connection, and he kept it to himself. William did. He probably didn't want to upset the family, as far as like.
Well,
Yes.
how did you come across that nugget about John Haynes telling Lucy Baines Johnson about Baba?
That it must have come out of a book. I think it came out of Ivy Deuce's book. I'm pretty sure it did. Or what happened with research after I lost the diaries was I would have 3 or 4 books open at the same time, be it Love Alone Prevails by Kitty or How a Master Works on my desk, and some of them didn't have indexes. So where's William? I mean, and I would tie it to dates in the timeline from Lord Mayhere and try to find out what other Mandali was saying something about William at the same time, and pull that into the story and weave it into the Lord Mayhere timeline. But Ivy and Charmian both, their books I found pretty informative. I'm sure there's inaccuracies in everything, including this, but they had a lot of information. And I loved the interview that Charmian did with Rano and William about what are you getting out of, being with Baba. I mean, it was beautiful that she said it was like talking to one person, and they just said, we're just tools for Baba, and it's not what we've got, it's what we've lost, made us better people. So. I'm just going to deal with 2009 a little bit, and you might have to get me off topic because that's when I lost Kate. Beware of IBS diagnosis, because we did that for a year, and it was not IBS, it was bowel cancer. And she got very weak and lost a lot of weight in the spring of 2009. So we said we better get a second opinion, and they did they checked her out, and there was a growth in her bowel. And so 7 weeks later, she died from a heart attack. 2010, I should tell you, probably within a week after Kate died, I was trying to find a place to stay in Myrtle Beach for the winter, because I had to have something. I had to get down here. So I ended up coming down for January, February, March, April, and part of May. That was the winter or spring that Bowji came, so I extended my stay because he came. And I got to know probably most people here a little bit, and some people a lot, like Ed and Alina and Anne, and it was wonderful. Very supportive. And about that time, Louise Roth Garnet Silverman came into my life. I think you're here, David.
Yes, yeah.
And she was so helpful with the book. Just, not everybody knew it, but Louise had a full-time job as a project manager with a team that did government contracts and writing, mainly technical stuff. So we met one night at the reading room, like so many people do after a concert, and got into a conversation, and she said, is there anything maybe I can help you with? And within a week, I did call her and say, because she was more mechanically inclined with the editing programs. I was just writing and just getting piles of paper, right? And then I had to feed it into the laptop. Well, that Microsoft Word, she was so familiar with, right? She could do magic with this program. So I said, I need somebody to do the footnotes and the end notes. And she said, I'll do them. And then, so I started sending pages across the street because I was in Briarcliff and she was in Briarcliff West. And I'd send 5 pages or 10 pages, and she started doing the end notes and the footnotes and looking things up and making sure that pages didn't get mixed up when you get them electronically. It can be a nightmare. And I knew when I finished the rough draft of that first manuscript, I looked at 2 more years of trying to do a PDF and marrying all the pictures to the copy for the book printer. And I said, that'll kill me. I can't do it. So Louise was there. She was happy to do it because she said, this government stuff I'm doing is driving me crazy. Give me some Bible work. Give me some Bible work. So that was really appreciated. Anyway, after the rough draft was done and I plugged it into the laptop, sent it to Louise, got all of the footnotes and notes done. All along in the process, I found gaps in the manuscript, and I knew that England and India were beckoning, that I had to go, right? I had to go and fill in some of these gaps. So in the summer, when I went back to Nova Scotia after finishing draft 1 here in the winter for 4 or 5 months, I just stopped. I sailed and played with the kids and reconnected with friends in Nova Scotia because they did feel like I'd run away. And I did when I came to Myrtle Beach, and they wanted to see that I was all right. So it was, I kind of stopped on the manuscript and knew that I was going to go to England and India in October to get more material to revise it. So off I went to England for a week, and I never stopped working when I was there. It was wonderful. Cassie Tarquini and Brendan Houlihan were my A team. As soon as I hit the ground, they helped me. I spent a wonderful day with William's 2 nephews. They came 4-hour train trip to London to see me, and I was able to interview them, but they brought piles of photographs and letters from William, and Cassie was running off getting things copied while I talked to the nephews, and one of the nephews' wife, Charles and Richard, Carolyn, she came along too, Caroline, and it was the most wonderful day with these 2 boys, and I could sense William in them. I could feel William's the mannerisms, even though I never met William. And they were happy to tell me about their uncle. He was a favorite uncle because when he came home and they were teenagers, they were smoking and probably, necking behind some tree or something. And William loved to hear about this. He said, "Yeah, keep it up." And they said all of our other aunts and uncles were stuffy and English, and William came in the door, and there was 9 of them, and he loved it. So that was. So England was busy, and then I went off to India, and I pleaded with the archives, the Trust Archives, to try to dig out some William material, and Janet Judson said, "Bob, we have not got time to do this for you." So I thought I'm going to have 3 weeks in India looking for material on William. But when I got there, they had gotten a pile of stuff up for me, so I spent most mornings working in the archives, and a lot of it was copying by hand and bringing back with me the material. And that's where I found the letter that closes the book from William to Baba, which I couldn't believe when I found that. It just sounded like he was writing to his sweetheart, right? I can't wait to get back to you. And I probably teared up in the archives. I'm sure I did, because it was like, there was not a lot of letters from William to Baba. There was a lot the other way. But this was written when he was a medical student, and he was just heartbroken that he couldn't be with Baba. Just heartbroken. Anyway, when I came back from India, I started to Slave of Love became a self-publishing venture. So I needed a book designer to make that happen. Again, the PDF process to get it ready for a book printer. I did not want anything to do with it. I was busy revising the manuscript, and the trip to India and England added 80 pages to the book. So that out of close to 400, that was a sizable addition. And Louise, again, had to deal with footnotes, endnotes, because these various editions went higgly-piggly all through the manuscript. They didn't just go on the end of the book. So she was tearing her hair out a lot, but she was, and telling me to back off when she had a deadline at work. And anyway, she persevered, and she persevered through her own illness and Sylvia's illness and death, and she would not let go of helping the Slave of Love. And Nancy, I hired a freelance book designer in Nova Scotia to get the finished product ready for the printer. So that was fun. Any other questions? I can just keep rambling on.
You said that one place I found it charming when they write things back and forth, probably in the early days. It mentioned it's Chinese poetry.
Oh,
Did that only come up that once, or what?
The peachy poem, or
I don't know. There just were poems. I thought maybe they were. He was just calling them whenever he wrote a poem.
They did share poems back and forth.
Yeah,
they did.
Hey, Bob,
Yes,
can I ask you a question?
sure can.
I'm curious how your understanding of who Donkin was changed from before you started the book and after. Like, what did you learn about him that was really kind of surprising or different through the process?
Well, the love factor for Baba blew me away, right? And that was the biggest thing, I think. And the effacement of William, the total effacement, that you have to understand that he grew up in a very well-off family, right? And I think he could have anything. He could have had anything. He could have had a brilliant medical career in Britain, and that's what his father wanted him to have, right? But when he met Baba at Kitty's house, he was blown away, like so many people Baba lovers are, right? and so I think the love for Baba, and he would, he threatened to walk out on Baba. We probably only know about 3 times in the book. I'm sure he probably did it a dozen times. Baba always reeled him back in, right? And he didn't even get down the road, or he didn't even make it to Bombay, I'm sure. Because Baba had a way to know when we needed to be spoiled a little. And he often would say wonderful things. I think William's a total effacement. I don't know how else to put it. That's what Baba wants from us all. But William seemed to get there early.
But he was the effacement, but still, Baba had like this special thing, like when Padre complained that he was wetting the room down so he could talk with Sheila. Baba just, and Padre was furious, and Baba just allowed it, and it's like Padre is like kind of scary. Not for the avatar, but he wanted that, he wanted that stop. So that was kind of a special thing that he allowed,
William, the other Mandalay used to think William was spoiled, and William would often do things to upset the other Mandalay. I think he was being a tool for Baba, and he didn't care the other Mandalay were angry at him. But as Sheila said, Sheila told me, as an aside from growing up with God, yes, it seemed like Adi Sr. and William were warring, and Padre. I don't know if the Padre-William war was ever resolved. I don't think it was. But she said Adi and William would have a drink together. It seemed like they were warring, but they talked philosophy and talked about the teaching. She said she would see them doing that often. So there was, I think, William would have known the game, right? He would have known the ego grinding. He would have known what Baba was trying to achieve, I think. I'm pretty sure. And he would lose his cool, from being overtired or never seeing the hospital that was supposed to be built for William to work in Mehrabad. It never happened, right? So.
I have another question.
Sure.
Well, you said in the very beginning that from reading The Wayfarers, and then there was something else that really grabbed you about William. What was that? What was it?
Well, he was a Westerner, and that was familiar to me. I'm very nervous about tackling an Eastern Mandalay member, even now. If I ever did, it would be Adi Sr., I think. He was so beautiful in his sense of conviction. And I never met him. I'm sure quite a few people here did meet him. I wish I would have. But it was a comfortable territory for me. And the dust jacket and the adventurous spirit of William appealed to me, that he had done that at 20 across the Sahara. So it was...
You mentioned the other influence being England.
I think our visits to England, it's a wonderful country. And Kate and I, we went alone on our first trip, and on the second trip, the kids and her mother came with us. One in 78, we went to Delia's flat. We were on our own, and then in 81, we took the kids and grandma. But they were both wonderful journeys, and I love London. So I didn't think I'm a country boy as far as I grew up in Halifax, but I did. London's a wonderful city to explore, that's for sure. That's where William grew up, so I felt a bond, But connecting with the family, when that happened, I was very discouraged about not connecting with the family, because it had been a long process of trying to, and I couldn't be in London to chase them down. And when Bridget came on board, she came on board like gangbusters. She was just so friendly, and she canvassed all of her cousins. We got to get remembrances of Uncle William for Bob. Got to send them to him, and she went quiet for a while. And I got a hold of Jane in Connecticut. I said, "What's your cousin doing? What's going on?" And she got a hold of Bridget, and she said, "Bob's worrying about you. You better write him or call him." So she right away. She said, "I'm sorry. I haven't been in touch." So they're like sisters now. It's a Donkin family.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a bonus that I never thought was going to happen. Anyway, the second revision did get completed in the winter of 2011 when I was in Myrtle Beach again. And, added 80 pages to the book and lots of challenges as far as all of a sudden the footnote would disappear or something would happen when we were trying to put it together. So it was tough. The book, the design of the cover was done by an artist friend in Nova Scotia, and she just happened to be one of Kate's two best friends. So the book is very special. She just said, "I'll do it. She's an artist. I'll do the cover. I want to be involved because
Why that picture, Bob? You did have to choose.
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Well, to me, it looks like the slave market to me. And Bob was saying, how much, what's the bid on this specimen? And the even funnier part was Nashwan said, "You're not going to use that picture on the cover with William with no shirt on." I said, "Yes, I am. I'm a newspaper man. I want to get people's attention." Nash said, "No, use a formal picture of his army uniform, head and shoulders. That's so, he's all dressed up." I said, "Nashwan, I'm not using that." So he didn't push it, but it was a sharp photo, and one of very few. David Fenster, I have on my laptop some pictures I didn't use, gave me a photo of Bob and William together, taken in probably the late 60s, but it was very blurry. And I was trying to get quality in all of my prints. So. Yeah.
This looks to me like Bob is saying, "Look at him, isn't he something?
Yeah.
Aren't my lovers something?" Yeah.
That too.
The look on Bob's face and just...
I think in Satara was one of the times that Baba publicly said to the other Mandalay, "Look what William's done for me," That time, probably when he could tell William was going to walk out the next day.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
it looks like William has a significant scar down the front of his chest.
He now I don't know if that's from boyhood, but he did have a number of operations as a youngster.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure. I think he had ticker problems, heart problems, that Baba was aware of. Remember the incident with the orange on the New Life? Somebody give William an orange because he's getting shaky.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was done, and that helped William. I never heard any details, and he was supposedly reaching for heart pills when he had his heart attack at Villa.
But he had to be very strong for doing all that hiking.
Yeah, he was in good shape, William. Boy. Anyway, the final enjoyable part of the book I thought would be picking out photos to go with the text. How hard can that be? But it turned out to be, in true Baba fashion, quite difficult. You had to get permissions from various people who had the photo collections. Then we had to get proper scans done for publication. So that took a long time to get done. and the captions were done, proofread, double-page spreads. Double-page spreads are kind of tricky. I know Andy's here; he's in the business, but I was pretty nervous about the double-page spreads. I think I only used 2 or 3 of them, but you get your gutter space, and you don't want double images. And it was all pretty taxing, and I was nervous because that you really don't see till the book comes out almost. Anyway, I'm up to June 2012. This is probably pretty well a wrap after this. I'd hoped that it would be published on May 26th, 2012, which was Kate's birthday, but I was a month late. It was June 26th, 2012. I think she forgave me. And it's kind of a funny little story. Laura knows this story, of course. Right away, I got an advance copy sent to Laura to look at, and she saw the book before I did. So, remember that? I told you. I said, you saw here, I did all this work, and you get to see it before I did, because they were coming from Winnipeg, but I dispatched right off the press. I sent one book to her because she wanted to take a look at it to see if they were going to carry it. And she wrote back the most beautiful word, marvelous. So. Anyway, somewhere along the line, I used Rick Chapman as kind of a source for self-publishing and a mentor. And Rick said to me early on when I was saying, how much discount do you give these booksellers on your books? If you want to make $25 and they want, 25%, 33% for. He said, they're going to move your book if they get a good % discount. Don't be so greedy. Anyway, so I think around the same time I got a message from Bob, or maybe a Bob, a friend, that said, be big, be generous. And I try to do that with Slave of Love, because to send this book to England, 18 copies, was $270 shipping. So the people in England, and this broke my heart, are charging double for this book, £24. And I talked to Tanya. I said, this is not right, because it's William's native land, and this book is twice as expensive. But so I'll probably have to go over and take a couple boxes of books at some point. Those are the shipping costs that England and India are atrocious. One box of 18. This is Canada, not as bad here, but $400 to send one box of books of 18 books to India from Canada. That's the shipping. So we're smuggling a few here and there in suitcases. If anybody's going to India, just tell them. Usually the Toronto Baba group has been very good. And Darius and Ruby and Marwan Dubash and Minu, they've been taking 5 or 6 books in their luggage, and I usually give people a free book if they do that for me. So whatever works, whatever. I think Laura's doing the same thing, right? Smuggling to India, right? The entire process was beautiful, but not without challenges. And it has been wonderful. And I want to thank Laura and Sheriar for today, and Carrie and marketing Slave of Love so well. It's been moving pretty well, I thought. We did a second printing in December. Not a lot, but 300 copies. And we'll keep doing them if they keep moving. So.
How have you felt changed by this work?
Oh, dear. Ooh. Overwhelmed, I think, by the wonderful comments from people who have read the book. I thought my ego was going to get inflated, but something happened in the process of writing the book that it was difficult. There was a lot of difficult times that I haven't crawled out of some of that low spots yet, because it was tough, some of it. I mean, all of a sudden I had to come up with, it's expensive, and you hire a book designer, and you know. Yes, Dave.
from the beginning of your project in 95 to publish in April 12 to 17 years. Assuming you're going to do another venture, how are you going to streamline that so some of us will live to read it?
Good question.
We'll have to read it in our next
He
life.
knows that I'm a procrastinator. I put a new deadline on myself because I'm running out of time too, probably. I hope to get the next project rough draft done this year.
I'm sorry, what did I miss?
Rough draft done on the next project this year.
Wow, that's quick.
First draft of the manuscript. Probably have to go to Europe and India to revise it when there'll be holes in it. I have all William. It was so hard to get material on William, but the next project I have pretty well all of the material in hand already. There was too much on the next project, so. But that's a good question.
Can you turn the
Thanks.
camera off so we can hear what he wants to say what it is?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Here's Kate. She was instrumental in making Slave Alone.
Yeah.
She's a wonderful gal. She was not necessarily. She said I'm not a Baba lover, but she was more of a giver than I am. And I'll tell a funny story. It's very short. She said, I love the Baba people on her visits to the center, but you can have the gobbledygook, she said. Barbara's not here, but Jane will tell her that Barbara and I and Kate, we went back a long way. So I said, we went over to see Barbara at the office at Dilruba. I said, tell Barbara what you said. She said, I love the Baba people. They're all creative, most of them, and Kate was very creative, very creative. She loved doing exhibits at the museum, and she loved her pottery. And she said, I love the Baba people, but not the gobbledygook. And Barbara almost fell off her chair. She said, I love the gobbledygook, but the Baba people drive me crazy. To each his own, eh? To each his own.